And the,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
First of all, devastated, shocked.
You're shocked, right? Right.
Yeah, shocked, devastated, talking, listen, I am from Ukraine myself. I came to the United States of America in 1995, right after the collapse of Soviet Union, a few years after that. And I lived through the images of tanks going through Moscow and when Soviet Union fell. And now 30 years later, I am living through the images of Russian tanks going through the streets or through the sovereign borders of Ukraine. I just finished talking to our seminarians. We have 7 of them from Ukraine that reside in the seminary. And they're telling me that their parents are afraid to go outside. The bombs are being thrown, the aircrafts are flying, the explosions everywhere. My mother lives in Western Ukraine, and she says that today she wasn't able to buy bread. The pharmacies are empty, people standing in lines, people trying to get as close as they can to Polish border. And so it's a whole idea of devastation that's there.
You went on a pastoral visit to Kyiv the first week in February.
Correct.
It must seem like that visit was, given where we are this hour, years ago, or a year ago at least.
Yeah, absolutely. Yesterday, late in the evening, I watched CNN. When I was in Kyiv, I stayed in a hotel very close to St. Michael's Cathedral. And I recognized the balcony from which CNN was doing their live stream of the hotel where I stayed. And they were pointing at St. Michael's Monastery. And so I called a friend of mine who lives in the monastery, monastic, and I said, how is it going? What's happening? And he sent me images of news media all over St. Michael's Monastery trying to get as much coverage as they can. And he says, as we were talking, he said, can you hear the explosions on the background? And outside of the monastery, I mean, probably in the proximity of a few kilometers there, they were able to hear them. Obviously, I couldn't through the Zoom link and what have you. But being in Kyiv at the beginning of February, people were on the edge. They thought of a possibility of provocation from Russians, but nobody expected a full invasion. Now, again, our Western allies and intelligence from the US have been telling and in the news networks that it's possible. It's quite possible that the Russians will do that. But, we live in the 21st century. Who wants to believe that in the middle of Europe, in Ukraine, somebody will take the actions that they just taken?
It's interesting. The last landmass war that we had in Europe was ended 77 years ago. And I was thinking about this, and I wonder if it might not be related to the fact that this is considered a more traditional kind of war as opposed to a nuclear one. Because during the Cold War, it was structured by virtue of how many nuclear weapons you possessed and the ability, first strike capability, that kind of thing. Now, it's as though we've reverted to the last century. And it's something that I didn't think that I would live to see, certainly, but here we are again. We are, Your Grace, we are on the verge for Orthodox Christians worldwide of entering, for Orthodox Christians, the most holy of seasons, Great and Holy Lent. What is your message to Ukrainian Americans here in the United States and to Ukrainian Orthodox Christians worldwide?
You mentioned the sacred season of Great Lent. One of my favorite spiritual journeys that I always take very seriously as I personally journey through this season. As Ukrainian Americans, we have a blessed opportunity right now to practice truly the prayer of Saint Ephraim the Syrian, when he talks about humility, when he talks about sacrifice, when he talks about looking at our own sinfulness and repenting over our personal transgressions and coming in the Lord and asking for protection and asking the Lord for the renewal that we need. I am dropping with my people of God of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the USA on my knees in that humble prayer of Saint Ephraim the Syrian and asking God to have mercy over the people of Ukraine. soldiers, military generals right now, they have this powerful weapon. They have nuclear power, they have weapons, tanks, and what have you. But as Christians, as people of faith, we also have a weapon in our hands, and that's a prayer. That's a way of prayerful way of life. And I'm asking people of Ukrainian Orthodox Church, Catholic Church, regardless of background, people of goodwill, to use the weapon of prayer to soften the heart of the aggressor against Ukrainian people and to stop the crimes against humanity that we're experiencing.
Your Grace, I think many Americans would be surprised to learn that Russia and Ukraine are predominantly self-identified Orthodox Christian countries. Would you, and much has been written about the political drivers behind this invasion, but some in the mainstream media have also written, they've tried to write faithfully about the cultural differences and the differences in faith among Orthodox Christians, those particularly in Northeast Ukraine who are aligned with the Moscow Patriarch, and those who are part of the Autocephalous Church under the protection of Metropolitan Aphanius. It's easy in many ways to talk about this in political terms. Do you also, would it be fair to characterize this as a religious war with Orthodox Christians killing Orthodox Christians?
I think the president of Russian Federation is making it a religious war. The responsibility is on him and his soul. I think the people in Ukraine, I'm from Ukraine, I worked in Ukraine for about a year when the Ecumenical Patriarchate of Constantinople tried to unite the different branches of Ukrainian Orthodoxy and to grant Thomas of Autocephaly to the church. Yes. The people of faith, Ukrainian Orthodox Christians, they desire unity, they desire the ability to pray together, to experience their culture, and to live in the tradition of our forefathers. Look, major saints of Slavic Orthodox Church, and I'm talking about Ukrainian, Russian Orthodox Church and Serbian, what have you, a lot of them are of Ukrainian descent. Ukraine has produced the fathers of Orthodox Church that have served in Russia, served in Moldova, in Romania, and other parts of the world, including Middle East and in Jerusalem and what have you. What I'm trying to say, Ukrainians have contributed to the fabric and to the mosaic of spiritual entity of who we are as Orthodox Christians. We are two distinct groups of people, Russians and Ukrainians. We're people of one faith, we're Christians, but our cultural background makes us different because of the impact that Western society has had on Ukraine. People of Western Ukraine and in general in Ukraine are open to the whole idea of self-entities, identifying themselves as Christians and asking themselves valid question. Why am I a Christian? Why am I Orthodox? Why am I doing the ritual I'm doing? Why am I living the way I live? While in the northern part or the northern neighbor, Russian Federation, would often use the teachings of the saints of the church and imply that you are not worthy of anything as a person, as a child of God, to accomplish anything in order to fully and truly approach him with your worthiness. Two distinct approaches to the sanctity of human life, who we are. And if you think about it.
One, it almost seems, I think what you're trying to say is that imbued in thinking and practiced in faith, the Ukrainian view is one of independence and freedom, and the fact that though living in a state of sin, those who profess orthodoxy are not entirely devoid of their ability to be good and to be considered that part of your soul that's good. Whereas in the more austere form of Russian Orthodoxy, all of humanity is condemned. And that raises the question, if you are not in control of your actions, then who is? Church hierarchy, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. That would be the correct description of what I was trying to explain. And and that brings down to the whole notion of Ukrainians are striving or trying for centuries to preserve their entity, who they are as children of God, to have their home in Kyiv, to pray in their native language. In my conversations with brothers from other Orthodox jurisdictions here in the United States of America, they tell me that Ukrainian language is not a blessed language. It has to be in church Slavonic prayers or what have you. But yet in America, we pray in English language. And we suddenly declare that English is a blessed language. These notions, these comparisons, they simply don't make sense. They're not logical. Right. And we need to depart from some of these rhetorics, some of these statements that we're making, and be people of reason. The faith requires us to use common sense, to use God-given ability to think, and we have the freedom of choice, after all, yes. as children of God.
Humanity is not entirely devoid of virtue. Yes. May I read to you? I know I sent this to you an hour or so ago, but it was a statement released at 1800 today from Moscow and from Patriarch Kirill. And I don't know if you had a chance to read it, but I want to read just some excerpts from it and ask your thoughts. At one point, he says that he appeals to all, quote, bishops, pastors, monastics, and laity with an appeal to provide all possible assistance to all victims, including refugees and people left without shelter and livelihood. Then he goes on to say the Russian and Ukrainian peoples have a common centuries-old history dating back to the baptism of Russia by the holy equal to the apostles Prince Vladimir. I believe that this God-given community will help overcome the divisions and contradictions that have arisen that have led to the current conflict. And finally, at his concluding statement to this message released earlier today says, quote, "May the all-merciful Lord, through the intercession of our most pure Lady Theotokos and all the saints, preserve the Russian, Ukrainian, and other peoples which our church spiritually unites." What are your thoughts on that statement? Conciliatory, goodwill, an appeal of some sort? How would you read that?
A letter from a religious politician and not a spiritual father of people of Ukrainian Orthodox Church. I think Patriarch Kirill is repeating the history lesson we all received, so-called history lesson we all received from President Putin a few days ago. And you cannot rewrite the history. Ukrainians and Russians, and again, I'm not being divisive here, but we're not sharing the same history. Ukraine, Kiev and Rus, not Russia. And in English language, there is a pure distinction because a lot of history books and theological books have identified Kiev and Rus as Russia, right, because of misinterpretation and translation of Rus terminology. But Kiev and Rus gave birth to Slavic Orthodoxy from Byzantine Empire. And it was only centuries later that Muscovite area received the blessedness of Holy Orthodoxy that came into that region. And to say that we share the same ethnic background and what have you, I think it's a mistake. It's an incorrect statement, and I wish the religious leaders will correct that terminology and cease utilizing it. It's not a brotherly conflict that we're having in Ukraine. I have a younger brother. When we were growing up, we had a conflict. We fought over little things, but at the end of the day, we knew we were brothers and we knew we had to respect each other because there was love between us. If you love somebody as a brother, as a true brother, you're not going to go and bomb the homes and destroy the lives of people and then say, well, let's bring humanitarian aid and what have you. If you're truly the spiritual father, as you claim, of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Moscow Patriarchate in Ukraine, then go and confront the political leader of Russian Federation and tell him, stop abusing people of my church, if you truly believe that you're the hierarch, the spiritual father of that church. But if you're not, then please don't manipulate. Don't.
And so the Patriarch's reference to Russian and Ukrainian peoples might be more narrow when he talks about the latter. In other words, those Ukrainian Orthodox aligned with him, and not the autocephalous church.
And when we worked on Thomas of autocephaly, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Moscow Patriarchate had a beautiful and wonderful chance to actually once and for all come and resolve the years, to quote Patriarch Kirill, of division that exists. He could have been a good friend of the Orthodox Church of Ukraine if he chose to respect the will and the desires and aspirations of Ukrainians to have their own church, to pray in their own language, to canonize their own saints, to live their own way of life, to establish charitable ministries the way they wanted to establish. But the spiritual father of the Moscow Patriarchate chose a totally different approach.
Your Grace, thank you so much for your time during these trying hours. I can't possibly imagine what it's like to sit where you are, responsible not only for the care of souls, but also as a human being, the concern and care that you must feel for your family and friends back home in Ukraine. I thank you so much, Your Grace. At this point, what message would you send to the international community? What is it important for people in the United States, in particular, to know, especially those who might say, I'm not Ukrainian, I don't know any Ukrainians, why should we be concerned with Ukrainians? It's their fight. We need to be focused on protecting our own. What would you say?
Because it's an issue of the crimes against humanity. It's against who we are as freedom-loving people of God. If we allow something like this to happen in Ukraine today, then atrocities similar to this will happen in other parts of the world. We're sanctioning other dictators and political leaders to go ahead and abuse the sanctity of human life. I agree with you. Some people may watch and hear reports and watch videos and say, what do I have to do with Ukraine? I have my own way of life. I live in America. It's thousands of miles away. As far as I'm concerned, Ukraine is far, far away from here, and it's not dangerous for me. Well, it is. We live in a cosmopolitan society, in a cosmopolitan world. It's no longer about one single nation here and there spread around the globe. We're all interconnected. Our economies, our way of life, our cultures, and then the very core of our existence, created in the image and likeness of God. We have to keep that in mind. We're all part of the mystical body of Christ. And if one part of the body hurts, then the entire body hurts and it's ill. When I get a paper cut on my finger when I work in this office, my entire body aches, feels the pain. So the entire body of humanity must feel the pain of the atrocities that are happening.
Your Grace, again, thank you for your time. Hopefully you, based on your schedule, might make yourself available for additional updates for us. And again, thinking of you, thinking of all those clergy who are currently serving in Ukraine and the entire country. Our thoughts and prayers. It doesn't sound like much now, it rings hollow, but it's all we can offer at this point.
May God help us all, and may God bless the people of Ukraine in this time of struggle. And thank you so much for having me and talking to me. Okay.
Thanks again for joining me briefly, Your Grace. I did have one additional question concerning Metropolitan Aphanius of the Orthodox Church of Ukraine. I understand that you spoke with him earlier today, a few hours after the invasion started. First of all, how is he? And secondly of all, what did he say to you?
I reached out to Metropolitan, obviously via mobile devices, tried to see how things are in Ukraine. My message did not get to him, but about 4 a.m. today, I received a phone call back from him. And then later, again, I spoke to him for the second time today. He is at his Metropolitan See at St. Michael's Cathedral in his offices. He told me he's in good health. He's standing with the bishops, clergy, and faithful military chaplains of Orthodox Church of Ukraine. He is not planning to leave Ukraine. He said that he is the spiritual father of the people of Ukraine, and he must be with his flock, with his people. So he's staying in Kiev, and I encourage everybody to offer their prayers for the primate of the Orthodox Church of Ukraine.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you again, Your Grace.